All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. My name is Henry Nixon. I am presenting Unknown Target, Uncovering and Detecting Novel In-Flight Attacks to Collision Avoidance, or shorter known as TCAS. Some acknowledgments to start. This paper was presented at the NDSS Symposium 2026. In San Diego, California, by a group of researchers from the University School of Advanced Event Studies in Rome, Italy, and also Genova, Italy. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names because I don't speak Italian, and it's probably not going to go well. So some background too with this, because this is pretty cool, and I really had learned a lot by going through this presentation. So I'm not a pilot. I'm sure that most of us in this class are not pilots also. So there needs to be some background information to actually understand what this paper is about before we even get started, right? So when you are flying in a plane, you're going to be in a designated control area for an air traffic control. I have a picture here that kind of shows the different control areas around the country. But so those ATC control towers you see on the airport, they're the ones who are going to be giving commands to aircraft to either increase, decrease altitude, stay on certain headings, when they can land. They're organizing all the traffic in the sky. They're using primary and secondary radar to do that. So they have a big radar dish that they ping out and get feedback. The aircraft in the air have a transponder, which transmits its location and then reports it back to the ground, so it's really easy to track by ATC. That transponder receives interrogation from the secondary surveillance radar on 1030 megahertz and replies on 1090 megahertz. Those transponders are there to assist them in identifying on ATC radar. And then on each aircraft, it has a TCAS system. So that's short for Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System. It's autonomous. It's aboard every aircraft. Military aircraft don't have it. They can turn it off if they want to hide if they're doing secret military things. And then small commercial drones don't have them. Some very old single engine aircraft or gliders also do not have these. But most commercial aircraft have a TCAS system installed. So when we are trying to defend against in-air, mid-air collisions, right, there's a tiered system of monitoring. So from the perspective of ATC, right, there's a couple different ways we ensure that planes don't crash into each other. Controllers will perform arriving aircraft of weather conditions, active runway, nearby traffic, and direct them to follow established procedures. This control relies on a bunch of different technologies they use. But basically, it's just they're looking at aircraft A and say, you need to climb and maintain X, and aircraft B is descend and maintain Y, just like on the diagram here. They're just given straight voice commands to make sure that nothing happens. Secondary defense is going to be secondary radar, right? So secondary radar is technology that actually feeds the screen. So those transponders I was talking about, they reply to the radar pulses broadcasting their altitude and identity. They operate in mode S, which is where the modern aircraft operate in mode S, where they self-broadcast their GPS position continuously. It's referred to as secondary radar because it works by reflecting the radio signal off the skin of the aircraft, whereas primary radar determines range and bearing, but can't determine elevation reliably. So the SSR allows them to do that, elevation. The response that the active transponder sends back includes the aircraft's altitude and a 4-digit octal identifier for each aircraft. So yeah, you can see on the diagram here how that works. Third defense is TCAS. So that's what we were talking about. That's what our presentation is about today. It's the final backstop. It's a box bolted to every commercial airliner that interrogates nearby aircraft directly. It builds its own 3D picture surrounding traffic and critically issues commands to pilots that they must follow without question. So if ATC says rise, like move up on X or Y, like gain elevation, and TCAS says descend, they're gonna overrule ATC and descend. So this like authority that TCAS has is kind of why it's such a high value attack target for this. So why TCAS mode S and mode C? So this is important to kind of understanding the background of the paper. So um, Mode S is the more modern one, and Mode C is the legacy protocol. So they introduced TCAS Mode C in the 1960s, and it's still carried on like older, smaller aircraft. But all modern commercial aircraft have Mode C enabled on TCAS. So the Mode S is selective. It has a unique 24-bit address, so it enables like individual interrogation, whereas Mode S just transmits altitude anyways. Um, Mode S is bidirectional and stateful, whereas Mode C is simplex and stateless, so it just replies after 3 microseconds and receives the interrogation final pulse. So there's no memory, no handshake, right? Um, Mode S transmits altitude, identity, velocity, and position data, whereas Mode C, they just calculate the range based on the reply delay, which is really important. Pay attention to that later. Um, and TCAS is mostly uses Mode S for surveillance of nearby aircraft. Why are we still using Mode C? It's a key question, right? Why? Um, for aircraft safety, we can't like make Mode C just completely not deprecated anymore because all those older aircraft that still use it and don't support Mode S still need to have TCAS alerts enabled in case they're in the airspace of a commercial airliner. So they can't drop Mode C support without being incompatible with the thousands of aircraft that still use it. Why does TCAS security matters? Right, so um, the United Airlines DC-7 and a TWA Lockheed Constellation collided over the Grand Canyon in Arizona on June 30th, 1956. All 128 people aboard were killed. It's the deadliest aviation accident in the U.S. history at the time. They were both flying under VFR rules, so visual flight rules in uncontrolled airspace. So there was no ATC, no alerts, no automation. They were just supposed to look out for other planes, and they didn't see each other, and so they crashed. So, direct consequence of this was the Federal Aviation Act of 1958, which created the FAA and U.S. airspace, and then TCAS was developed in the decades prior to that to be an automated or the last resort when everything else fails: controllers, visibility, and communication. So yeah. All right. So coming back to the paper. So this paper is presenting an incident that was done that happened in March 1st of 2025 in Washington, D.C.A. So I'm in the D.C. area, so this is really close to me. Um, Basically, as planes came down from the northwest and down the river corridor to DCA, they received these TCAS alerts, all from an unknown target stating to descend. So if you look at this diagram on the north west there, all the planes kind of come down with those arrows and land at DCA, which is at the bottom right of this diagram. So they pass some of those prohibited airspaces around the White House and the Naval Observatory. Um, and so there was like from 1109 to 1410 UTC, it disrupted flight communications for a couple hours. Like a bunch of pilots would say, "Hey, I got a TCAS alert. I don't see anything." Um, Neither the FAA nor the NTSB has released an official explanation or preliminary report of this. There was a letter from the House committee saying that they attributed the interference to counter drone systems being operated by the U.S. Secret Service near the approach path. But The paper doesn't shift the blame, it just implies that it could come from that. It does, the proximity to the restricted airspaces does kind of add some geopolitical context that it might have been that. So some aircraft that were infected, they were down on the approach path, and they get a TCAS alert that would say, there's an object 600, 800 meters close to you, and you need to move. So they all received, like 8 aircraft received full RAs, so resolution advisories, instructed to descend. 2 aircraft received traffic advisories only, and then 3 aircraft performed a go around, which is essentially they had to cancel their landing and completely restart the whole process, which delays flights, obviously. The data, what it tells us. So all this ATC data is publicly available. So the researchers were able to download this, and they were looking at some key findings. So the intruder that we're calling the TCAS alerts was broadcasting in mode C only. So that's that legacy protocol. So every single one of those 110 resolution advisories was classified in mode C. Only 102 of 110 messages flagged a single intruder, and the 8 exceptions were just like tracking errors for that. The intruder had a fixed altitude, so they were always at 2,300 feet, which is kind of, again, like mode C does altitude based on the reply delay. The intruder was really close and had a consistent direction. So the median encounter range was 370 meters, which is really close in aircraft space. And all encounters were within 1 kilometer. The bearing was essentially 315 degrees, 345 degrees to the aircraft heading, so about 11 o'clock. So the traffic, one of the pilots reported like traffic right at our 11 o'clock. And importantly, nobody saw anything. ATC didn't see anything. The pilots didn't see anything. ATC reported no known traffic between you and the field and no radar return. So it had great visibility that day. They definitely should have been able to see something if it was within 370 meters range, if it was a real aircraft. Some deduction, this was a ground transmitted attack. So the geometric analysis of the distances show that the victim is moving together with the victim aircraft. It can't be an equipment malfunction because the affected aircraft were all built by 2 different manufacturers, operated by 3 different airlines, so it's completely different. Like, it can't be a simultaneous failure. It's not an airborne object because you'd be able to see it at 370 meters. Like, nobody saw anything. A drone tracking aircraft could be possible, but again, drones don't carry TCAS responders. So in order for a TCAS alert to go off, it has to be 2 different aircraft, both have a TCAS at the same time. So the conclusion is that it was a stationary ground transmitter using mode C range spoofing. Since there's no visual contact, no radar return, it moves with the victims, and there's a fixed altitude. This is also consistent with the congressional letter's attribution to a counter drone system, since such systems can implement area denial by injecting ghost aircraft into TCAS trigger alerts and discourage people from entering the restricted airspace without a physical engagement. So how do we hack mode C? How do we spoof this range? In the paper, they presented 3 different scenarios for this. So scenario 1 is you look at that 3 microsecond reply. I'm probably using the wrong word for that, but 3 US reply. And you apply to the victim with the aircraft's current altitude. So a legitimate mode C transponder replies back in that space, and the extra is subtracted to make a distance calculation. So if you set the reply to arrive before that 3-second delay, microsecond delay, it will essentially say it's closer than what it is. So the attacker is just going to try to send it quicker. It's a really small window, so that timing problem is very difficult. This only gets you about like reducing the perceived range to the transmitter by about 500 meters. So if you're sitting on the ground and you're, sending the transmission to an aircraft, you're not that close. So scenario two, you can change between mode A and mode C interrogations since they're like structurally similar, except for the timing of P3. Mode A places P3 8 microseconds after P1, and mode C places it at 21. The attacker listens for P1, waits just the 8-second mark. Um, yeah, 8 microsecond mark. I just had to look that up, make sure I was saying it right. And mode C places it at 21 microseconds. The attacker listens for P1, waits past it, and then if no P3 arrives, like if we don't hear P3 at all, it concludes that the interrogation is mode C and fires reply immediately without waiting for P3 at all. So if you reply in that 16 microsecond, you get a range reduction of about 2.4 kilometers. The paper implements this strategy and then also validates its use as this was what was observed in DCA. The last one is a little more difficult. Is essentially once you get that P1 interrogation, you reply immediately. It maximizes spoofed range up to 3.5 kilometers, but you can't distinguish between mode A and mode C, which causes some problems. So it essentially displays like two ghost targets, with one identifying undefined squawk code of mode A and one at the spoofed altitude of mode C. So at different ranges, that's not consistent with DCA since it showed a single clean intruder with no dual target artifacts. So they reproduced the DCA scenario using scenario 2 because, they were like, this is the most plausible. So they started using just software-defined radio, but it doesn't work for mode C because the microsecond delay, 16 microseconds to fire after P1 is just so small, and a general purpose OS can't guarantee a latency window low enough to do this. The scheduling generator alone blows past the window. So the 90% reply rate was only achievable at 52 microseconds, which places the ghost aircraft 8 kilometers farther than intended. So the solution is they just put it on a single chip, combining FPGA fabric, RF transceivers, and an ARM CPU. So all the timing logic runs on hardware only with no OS. This attack is super cheap. The design is simple. So it kind of shows that this would be really easy for anyone to do this. They also tested the attack against a certified Aeroflex IFR avionics tester, so the same system used to certify real aircraft transponders. And it worked 100% of the time. The only failure they had was that it had transmitted power because there's no external amplifier within the shielded enclosure, but essentially the implementation is indistinguishable from a real transponder at the protocol level, which is where these TCAS alerts go from. So the attack results. They sent like 3,709 mode A and 3,022 mode C interrogations to the Aeroflex tester. 100% reply rate and 0% for mode A, which is, again, that scenario 2. That's what they want. Like you're trying to basically reply early, so it's never a mode A reply. So the key numbers for this is the mean reply time they achieved was 12.8 microseconds with a theoretical max of 16. The median spoof range they were able to achieve is about 1.9 kilometers, so 2 kilometers. And it's extremely consistent, right? So at DCA, the RAs were triggered at a medium range from 370 meters. So an attacker operating from 2 kilometers away using S2 would appear to TCAS at roughly 76 meters, well inside the trigger thresholds for resolution advisory. Doesn't need to enter the restricted airspace, or even close to the airport. Like a line of sight to the approach path from 2 kilometers is super easy anywhere in Washington, D.C. Finding the transmitter, the detection problem. So they were actually trying to find where it happened, and they were able to use some analysis to figure out where it came from. So the FAA eventually diagnosed the incident through spectrum analysis using a fixed radio transmitter and in a location inconsistent with airport activity. Um, this is really slow. Spectrum analysis requires specialized RF monitoring equipment that isn't routinely delayed at airports, and dedicated personnel who know how to operate it and interpret results. Time to set up and sweep. You basically can't spin this up when an incident's happening. The researchers for this paper, they show here that you can use TIDR and TIDB data, range to intruder and bearing to intruder, to determine information about the intruder while it's happening. This data is already on ATC screens, but it's just nobody's used it yet. So they did some simulations here. So since each aircraft that receives a resolution advisory broadcasts its own GPS position, plus the range and bearing of the transmitter, of the intruder, if the intruder is a ground transmitter, the aircraft data is already telling you that it's somewhere along this bearing, approximately at this range from where it was when the resolution advisory fired. So using that information, you can basically run enough of these through a probability filter, and it puts it over a map, and the location converges, right? They called it a sequential Monte Carlo particle filter, which again, I'm not a mathematician or a statistician, so this is above my pay grade. But the output is a probability map, a heat map where the transmitter most likely sits. Some important callouts is there's no new infrastructure required for this, right? It's using only the resolution advisory broadcast data that the ATC receives. It works with really bad noisy data, and the filter can handle it. And there's a sanity check. So if the attacker is moving rather than stationary, the cloud doesn't converge, it spreads out. So the probability of the ellipse grows by about 10 times compared to more of stationary attacker. So that's like a good failure mode of showing that like it might actually be an actual TCAS alert. So you import those resolution advisory broadcast messages, and then you cross-reference it with the GPS positions to get that geographic probability map showing the best estimate of a transmitter location. So they were able to run this through from the DCA incident, and so you can see all those blue X's of where the resolution advisories were fired, and the heat map of where the plausible attacker locations, which again, it's about 890 meters from the center of P56B, the U.S. Naval Observatory, which is where the vice president lives. So it lasted about 3 hours before it was diagnosed. Using the sequential Monte Carlo rationalization that the researchers used, they were able to localize the attacker in under 40 minutes using only the resolution advisories broadcast from the first 2 aircraft affected. The FAA just wasn't using this way. So they had 94% probability that it was from this location. Pretty cool, constrained it to about 4.3 kilometers. But even if the source is near the Naval Observatory, you can't conclude from the RF data alone, like who operated the transmitter or whether it was malicious. Like a nation state actor could easily position near the restricted airspace of P56B to implicate government systems. And the paper flags this explicitly that it's not attributing blame to anyone. It's just saying like this is the likely location of the transmission. So conclusions. A real world attack happened on March 1st, 2025. The FAA said prior to this that there is no known exploitation of this in the real world and that it's not likely to occur. Public data shows that this happened. The CISA assessment said laboratory only, not remotely exploitable, no mitigation available. The paper contradicts that. They show that it happened in the real world. You can exploit it, and there's mitigations on how to find the location of the transmitter. So CISA is updating their advisory based on this paper. Mode C is a simpler and lower barrier attack vector than Mode S. So since Mode S is authenticated and encrypted, it's a lot harder to spoof. But since we're still backwards compatible with Mode C, that's why we use it. The scenario 2 is validated experimentally with precision and passes the avionics testing. We can detect the data using the data that ATC already gets from the resolution advisories. So the sequential Monte Carlo rationalization localizes a stationary ground transmitter to a median accuracy of 855 meters. No new sensors, no new infrastructure, no new cost. Really easy. Just put it in there. When they applied this scenario to DCA, it was a 95%, 94% probability that the source was within PP to 6B and localized in under 40 minutes, versus the 3 hours it took the FAA in real life to figure out the cause, or figure out it was nothing. So I thought this was really cool. A lot of implications. It's definitely a system I don't work with. I'm cybersecurity. And the need to be backwards compatible with Mode C is kind of an interesting sub case that you don't see in software and you would only see in like a hardware implementation. So ask some questions. I thought this paper was really cool. Go read it yourself. They have a really cool video and some slides. And then you can also go and view the ATC incident from March 1st and listen to the pilots while they go through it. So thanks for listening and come ask me questions.